afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you are. I am James Kedi, an editor at AfronomicsLaw.org, and I am here with two great friends who have been doing some very good work in Zimbabwe. I'll introduce them shortly. In this Indaba, they shall be telling us about a very important case that they've been involved in the High Court of Zimbabwe at Harare. This is the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development case against the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, where they got consent orders from the High Court of Zimbabwe in a really important case involving the role of Parliament in approving borrowing, both domestic and external. And so I'll begin by introducing our guests in this Indaba, which are important conversations Afronomics Law hosts with guests who have expertise and experience in particular areas of international economic law. So first is Chioneso Samantha Kanoyangwa, who is a Zimbabwean lawyer and socio-economic justice activist. She holds a Bachelor of Laws degrees with honors from the University of Zimbabwe, duly registered in the High Court of Zimbabwe with a great interest in international economic law issues as they relate to Africa and the Global South, and serves as a regional representative for Southern Africa for Afronomics Law's Academic Forum. She works at the African Forum on Network and Network on Debt and Development, AfroDAD, as a policy assistant and then legal analysis and advocacy portfolio. She holds a certificate in democratic governance from the University of Cape Town and is currently pursuing a master's in human rights, peace and development with the African University. The second person to join us is John P. Maketo, who is a programs manager at ZIMCODD, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development. He is a debt management practitioner, an economic justice expert, a public policy analyst with 18 years experience in developmental governance and human rights work in Zimbabwe and in the Southern African Development Community region, in particular with interest in governance, accountability, human rights, advocacy, economic justice programming, and has tons of experience working with national and regional organizations, including the National Association of NGOs, NANGO, the Transparency International Zimbabwe, Southern Africa People's Solidarity Network, Fight Inequality Alliance, Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZIMCODD. And so we're delighted to have both of you here to discuss this important ZIMCODD case against the Minister of Finance and Economic Development of Zimbabwe. So I guess the consent orders that you guys were able to obtain in a very short period of time, only having filed this case within less than a year since you obtained those orders. I want to begin with you, Samantha, to ask you to provide some background about Zimbabwe's debt situation, its current efforts under the arrears, clearance, and debt relief and restructuring strategy to enter into the good books of the International Monetary Fund after many years in the cold following a series of sanctions. So Samantha, over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gabi. So yes, maybe I'll start by just painting a picture of the current debt situation that Zimbabwe finds herself in. So currently, according to the statistics that are available to us, which are from, I think, roughly 2022 September, Zimbabwe's current debt stock is at 17.5 billion. And of that 17.5 billion US dollars, 14 billion is accounted for as external debt. But maybe just to go back in history to see where this problem really started, you'll find that in the early 2000s, Zimbabwe was already in debt distress. And as the years progressed, there was also a deterioration in a number of economic sectors of development, including your education, your health, your social protection, because the government was prioritizing the servicing of those debts at the expense of social protection and these other important critical sectors of development. So you find that even as the years went by, Zimbabwe was already in debt overhang, where there were limited lines of credit available to the government. And also now we're actually facing a blockage in terms of accessing future lines of credit. So there's no prospective funding that is coming our way. And it's been really critical for the government to then think, okay, so how do we move forward? And the only way to move forward is to create or establish an international re-engagement strategy that ensures that Zimbabwean government repairs its relations with the creditors so much that we are then able to have access to lines of credit that will then help us, especially now coming out of COVID and then also facing this economic meltdown, also in the context of the Russia-Ukraine context. And so all these issues, climate change, all of them, they're coming together and they've been pushing the government to then say, okay, so we need to engage our creditors so that we repair our relations and we move forward. And so the strategy that the government has embarked on just recently is the arrears strategy and debt restructuring plan. And through this, the creditors have been really forthcoming. The government is also showing some sense of commitment to ensure that whatever is then placed on the table, they reach an agreement and we move forward. And so the creditors have put 3 asks that they want from the government, and these include economic reforms, governance reforms, and also just the general respect of property rights, especially in light of the compensation of the white farmers. And so these are the asks that the creditors have put forward. And yeah, that is the stage that we are at right now. We have the strategy in motion, at least in discussion, in negotiation, and hopefully it will result in an efficient strategy that will help Zimbabwe to move forward.
Thank you very much, Samantha. That's a great background on the indebtedness and the situation that Zimbabwe finds itself in. John, we now return to you to tell us why ZIMCODD brought the case and what ZIMCODD sought to achieve in bringing this case.
Thank you very much, Prof. Gathi. ZIMCODD brought this case before the courts of law, the High Court of Zimbabwe. Number one is as a civic duty to represent the majority of citizens that most of the time find themselves voiceless in such matters. So this was a public interest litigation case, typical PIL case. And you will note that from the filing affidavit of the case, it was ZIMCODD as the main lead applicant, along with other co-applicants who are in themselves individual citizens who proved that they have actually a case to also stand before the court and make an appeal for a constitutional declarator. And this is what we sought before the courts. The other reason why we brought it this case is that there was and there is still a misalignment of the laws, and this is what we thought we actually sought to achieve, to align the Public Debt Management Act in its current state with the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which came about in 2013. So you find that the Public Debt Management Act currently allows for the Minister of Finance to contract loans and give state guarantees to state-owned enterprises and any other private or public entity without going to Parliament for approval. And we found this in contradiction with the provisions of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which actually provides that all loans or all borrowings that the government of Zimbabwe enters into, or any agreement which places a fiscal obligation on the citizens of Zimbabwe or on the government of Zimbabwe, must be approved in prior by the Parliament of Zimbabwe. And so there was this lacuna, a legislative lacuna, which we sought to have actually achieved. And so because the glaring gap, or I mean, the gap was so glaring, such that, like you rightly put it across, there was consent. The order was by consent, and there were no adverse challenges from the listed respondents. They actually concurred that there was a gap that needed to be rectified through a legislative process. Hence, the order, the High Court order that was issued. And lastly, we also sought to prove that it is possible to use legislative or judicial advocacy to achieve, governance reforms, to achieve good governance of public resources. And indeed, the outcome of the process proved that judicial advocacy can actually work to improve good governance for the better good of all citizens.
Thank you very much, John, for outlining why ZIMCODD brought the case. That's very illuminating, and so I want to turn back to you, Samantha. Now, you were the third applicant in this case. So as John was saying, you're one of those, like ZIMCODD, exercising your civic duty to hold the government accountable for this gap, this lacunae that John has just told us about. And he's already laid some of the foundations for the case in terms of the constitutional and legal basis upon which it was brought, and also indicated why the government very quickly entered into consent orders rather than to engage in contested litigation around what was obviously a gap. Do you have anything to add to what John said?
Thank you, Professor Gathi. I'd say, looking at the applicants, you can see a careful selection and intentional and deliberate act of making sure that there's representation. You'll find, for example, the first applicant is ZIMCODD itself, and the second applicant is Henry Kane, and he's representing people with disabilities. And then the third applicant is myself. I'm a young person and I'm also female, so I'm a young lady. So the young females are also part of this litigation on debt justice. And you also find the third one is Kuvea, Diana Kuvea, and she's a woman. So you'll find there's deliberate intention to ensure that there's representation across the citizens that ZIMCODD has partnered together with, to ensure that there is some sense of alignment with the Constitution when we're looking at our public debt management. And then I would also add that it has been really important that when we're looking at issues to do with debt justice, we do not focus on the numbers only, but also try to look at the constitutional and legal foundational issues that arise. And so, like what John really put aptly, it has become necessary for us to also use the legal approach and use the legal lens to ensure that we also look at how we can use the law to ensure that we have some sense of order, some sense of alignment, and as far as debt justice is concerned.
Yes, thank you very much, Samantha. I see the Constitution of Zimbabwe, as both of you have pointed out, in Article 300, talks about the limits on state borrowing on both public debt and state guarantees. In this case, involved both of those issues, the public debt as well as the state guarantees that the state gives for borrowing by all sorts of Zimbabwean entities. And it provides that in Article 300 of the Zimbabwe Constitution, an act of parliament must set limits on the borrowings by the state, the public debts and obligations whose payments or repayment is guaranteed by the states. And those limits must not be exceeded without the authority of the National Assembly. And secondly, provides an act of parliament must prescribe the terms and conditions under which the government may guarantee loans. And then within 60 days after the government has concluded a loan or guarantee, the minister responsible for finance must cause its terms to be published in the Gazette. Then it provides the minister responsible for finance must at least twice a year report to parliament on the performance of loans raised by the state, and that any loans guaranteed by the state at the same time as the estimates of revenue and expenditure laid before parliament and that a comprehensive statement of public debt should be provided by the Minister of Finance to Parliament. So now let's go through, in light of that, the specific orders that you were able to obtain based on the discussion so far. And I wonder if, before we do that, you'd like to say anything about the lawyer that represented all of you in this litigation. And was that significant? This might be important for others in other African countries considering litigation like this in terms of the strategy.
I can go first. Yes, the lawyer that represented the case, there's significance in the choice of the lawyer. So 2 or 3 things to highlight about his profile. Number one, he is a former Minister of Finance in the government of Zimbabwe. So definitely somebody who is well-versed with the running of the portfolio of Treasury. Secondly, he is also a person who's we have shown passion around public debt management. So definitely, yes, we may not all find former ministers of finance to represent us in PIL cases, but I think the issue around passion around legislative reforms is definitely key. And here is one man who has demonstrated such cause for the rule of law. He has led and won many constitutional cases in the past over and above this particular case in which ZIMCODD was the co-applicant. And so definitely this is why he is of significance as the representative in this particular case. Yes, of course, he's also coming from across the parliament divide as a member of the opposition political party. That may not be very significant in terms of choice of representation legally, but we are also saying, so in Zimbabwe, he has been chairing the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament, and it is a rule or a principle rather that the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee is ordinarily someone from the opposition. So it is a governance principle that is standardized to ensure that at least there is critical look around public finance management and auditing of public resources. So this is the profile that he brings to the case, which proves very important and significant in the handling of the case.
Thank you very much, John. Anything to add, Samantha, about Tendai Mbiti, who was your lawyer in this case?
I think John quite put it very aptly. Just to say, he's a very, very prominent lawyer, and all legal students, all lawyers, at some point look up to him because he's got that legal reasoning capacity that is quite impressive. So yeah.
Very good. So, unsurprisingly, you all chose a really outstanding advocate for your case, who, as we have said, was able to get the consent orders without very difficult back and forth litigation. So the first order that you all got in this case was that the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning and Development shall propose to the National Assembly the limit on public borrowing that is envisaged in Section 11, Paragraph 2 of the Public Debt Management Act. And why is this significant? Who'd like to go on this one?
John, would you like to come in? Or I can go ahead.
I think you're muted, John. Sorry.
Oh, my apologies, I was muted. So the significance of bringing or proposing to the National Assembly the limit on public borrowing envisaged in Section 11.2 of the Public Debt Management Act is definitely to bring about fiscal discipline in the management of public finances, particularly in debt management in Zimbabwe, against a background where we have had unsustainable debt over the past decade or two. And there has also not been accountability and transparency around debt contracting, public debt contracting processes. And therefore, this definitely becomes very, very significant. And it also allows for separation of powers within the governmental order, whereby the finance minister, as a member of the executive, is brought to account in the legislature and seeks approvals or makes certain targets and has to abide by those targets, particularly when it comes to public borrowing. So this is why it is so significant. It ascertains the principle of separation of power in the governmental order in Zimbabwe, which is provided for in the Constitution of Zimbabwe as well.
Very well. The second order, Samantha, was that the minister shall gazette a bill amending the Public Debt Management Act, outlining the role of Parliament in approving loans and guarantees before they are contracted. And as you sort of tell us about that, I was wondering whether this may have anything to do with the arrears clearance, debt relief, and restructuring strategy as one of the commitments that maybe that the government of Zimbabwe has made. I know that in Zambia, a similar bill was passed in the context of its ongoing efforts to restructure its debt. So I wonder whether there's any connection between what's happening in that process and this particular order that was agreed to by the government of Zimbabwe.
Thank you. So when you look at Zimbabwe's constitution and even the Public Finance Management Act, there is some mention to some extent of the role of Parliament. However, the constitution, for starters, is a social contract between the government and the people, and it's not meant to be as exhaustive. The same goes for the Public Finance Management Act. It's quite too broad. Public debt management is only one facet of Public Finance Management Act. So it was really important that we have these amendments in the Public Debt Management Act itself to ensure that we validate the role of Parliament. And also just looking at the overall context in which this consent order came into. Like you said, the arrears strategy, it was very opportune that we have the order being granted at a time when the government is already working on something with the creditors. And for me, when I look at it, it's a very calculated strategic move by the government, which is saying we really are committed. It's a show of commitment that we really are going to be following the economic reforms that you have put on the table. We're going to be following the governance reforms that you have put on the table. Now, looking at the economic reforms, the very amendment of the Public Debt Management Act is exceptional. It means that we're going to have some changes that we have been clamoring for years, and it only really comes now. So the timing is very important to capture. It has been because of one might argue it has been because of the arrears strategy. And then on the governance front, rule of law, good governance, democracy, you see the judiciary coming in and, interpreting the law as is and saying, no, this is the way we should go. And you even find it's by consent. There's no dispute to the fact that we need reform in our public debt management system. So for me, I really think the timing is very critical. We need to be really aware and alert that this has been done at a time where the Zimbabwean government is trying to show its creditors and the rest of the international community that they really do mean to reform the public finance management system as a whole. However, it remains to be seen how this will turn out in applicability. But at the present moment, this is the stage that we are at.
Thank you very much, Samantha. That's really important. The context is very important, both in terms of the arrears policy, but also because of the pressure that people like you and ZIMCODD have been for many years seeking these changes. So the last three orders, John, first is the sort of requiring the Public Management Act to be amended to reflect the limits on loans and guarantees, and then, of course, to outline the procedure by which Parliament rejects or ratifies any loan or guarantee. And third but not last, that the minister shall gazette a bill amending the Public Debt Management Act, outlining the procedure by which the state regularly updates Parliament on debts which are obligatory loans, including guarantees. And these are the broad public debt management reforms that Samantha is talking about. And I wonder whether, like Samantha, you have similar reflections about the significance of these orders as we begin to conclude, also reflect on, what ZIMCODD is currently doing to make sure that these orders are complied with by the government.
Okay, thank you so much. So yes, firstly I'll mention that the last three orders they seek to align the Public Debt Management Act with the Constitution of Zimbabwe, particularly Section 300, subsection 1. That's which is very significant, and to ensure that there is consistency of the law and its application. Secondly, the orders also seek to bring to prominence the role of Parliament in the oversight and management of public finances in Zimbabwe. And again, I'll bring back the issue of separation of powers, which is emphasized in these orders. The executive at any point must be able to account sufficiently and be transparent to the citizens through the legislature is an institution that represents the people. Hence, the issue around regularly updating Parliament on performance of public debts and including guarantees. The background against some of these orders is also that is highlighted in our application. Our application is that the asset guarantees that have been issued to private entities and some public entities linked to political elites, and that we had also seen a conflation of debt and corruption in Zimbabwe. And this order, we are of the view that it will bring to rest such practices whereby the Minister of Finance is able to secretly issue guarantees to any public or private entity without approval of Parliament. And coming then to the issue of what we are doing as ZIMCODD to ensure that these orders are actually implemented. So we have begun to engage some partners within the legal fraternity at institution level, and one such is an organization called Veritas. Veritas works a lot with Parliament in Zimbabwe, and the intelligence we have gathered so far is that this is a technical order, and in past experiences, the Attorney General may or usually then approaches technical partners to assist in the drafting of the amendment bill. So this is one proactive step we are trying to undertake to assist in the drafting of the amendment bill to support and ensure that the order is actually implemented. So we want to seek to engage technical drafters, including we've worked with the drafter for Parliament in the past, and we hope that they can assist to draft this and then hand over that to the Attorney General for review and adoption, and then such that the minister may bring it before Parliament. So those are some of the proactive steps that we're trying to do to ensure that the order is actually brought to life.
Thank you, John. Samantha, do you have anything to add before we go to the last question?
All right. I think what I can add is just looking at the applicants in this case, in addition to ZIMCODD, I think as the different groups of society that are represented by the applicants, we are not resting. We're not just sitting on our hands. We're going to be following up as well, just practicing our citizenship and asking the necessary questions to ensure that we know at least at what stage are we, because we've got a time period in which this needs to be effected, and that is 12 months from the date of the order. And so we really need to be alert. We are being alert as to the time period, and also just being aware of what is the stage that we are at, what is happening, what are the challenges, just to make sure that we have the order brought to life. And also just to say, this win is a very big win, and not just for Zimbabwe. ZIMCODD has ensured that it has empowered its citizens to be the voice that the country needs in as far as debt justice is concerned. And just the very act of litigating debt justice, I think this is going to be a very, very big phenomenon that we're going to be seeing also in other African countries. So it has set a legal precedence that I'm sure other African countries would take.
Yes, thank you very much. And you're very right. This is an important case. It sets a really important precedent. And so as we end, I wanted to ask each of you to reflect on the possibility of getting this eventual bill, which I'm sure you will all manage to get to Parliament. What are the prospects for the passage of that bill, given the composition of Parliament, and in light of the election coming up soon? You have still several months to the order being executed. As Samantha, you correctly say, the government has until March, I guess, 23rd, 2024, since the order was obtained on 23rd of March, 2023. So I wonder what each of you would like to, in closing, tell us about those prospects.
All right, thank you. In light of, firstly looking at the current composition of Parliament and the order itself. So firstly, I do not see that this bill will be brought before Parliament in the life of the 9th Parliament of Zimbabwe. I strongly suspect that it will be brought before Parliament in the 10th Parliament. So we are also not very certain about the composition of that particular Parliament, but judging from current settings, should the ruling party retain the majority in Parliament, I also do not see a strong opposition to the bill, given that it is not in any way against the establishment of the current government. In actual fact, it may be to their credit should that bill be passed, because it will somehow present a sense of prudence in the management of public resources, in particular public debt management. So I am hoping that this will be one of the issues that will be on the 10th Parliament's legislative agenda. And then, yeah, the last point it would be that I'm sure that the political costs of opposing the bill, I think will be too high to ignore, because there would then be need to explain why the executive is against the parliamentary oversight in the management of public resources. Thank you. And over.
Great. Samantha?
Yes, I'd like to agree with John and say Parliament is already wrapping up its business to close off its years. And so it's likely to get into the next legislative agenda. And just looking at how it would then pan out then, yeah, I do not see any contestations to that, because I think the beauty of this case is that it has not been politicized, and it has also happened at a time when the government really needs to show some sense of commitment to the international community, that it really wants this arrears strategy, and really wants to have some arrears clearance and have a debt strategy that is clear to ensure that we open new lines of credit. And so it's sort of like a win-win situation, the way I see it. And so it should pass without any hassles. But then again, it's very difficult to predict, because contexts do change, especially now that we're going into the elections. So I think it remains to be seen how this will pan out.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, John Maketo and Samantha Kanoyangwa, for this very insightful Indaba discussing this very important case, ZIMCODD versus the Minister of Finance and Economic Development in Zimbabwe, where you got consent orders on very significant questions of parliamentary oversight of the debt contracting process and limits on debts and guarantees. It's really a significant victory that you've worked on as ZIMCODD and as activists for a long time, and inspiration to other African countries trying to do the same. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure this will be important inspiration for our listeners and our viewers. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.